Welcome, everyone. We will get started in just a moment. Hey, I'm assuming someone give me a thumbs up if we're at the top of the hour. Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. This is Carol Scott from the National Ombudsman Resource Center. I want to welcome you to the webinar today, Improving the Onboarding Experience of Potential Ombudsman Program Volunteers. I'm so happy to have everybody on board. There is a Q&A button that you can click on if you want to write down a question for the speakers. You can also put comments and links to resources or whatever in the chat. Um, let me see if there's any other housekeeping. I think that's it. We'll have time for questions and answers after each of this two sets of speakers, and at the end. So we're so happy to have everybody with you. So in the chat, put in what should be done before the actual training begins. What kinds of activities are you doing before the person sits down and attends a classroom or a classroom session or is presented the training manual to read? Um, what are some of the activities that happen? Okay. Background check, screening for conflict of interest, interviewing, background check, conflict of interest, initial facility visit, background, conflict of interest, interviews, explain the expectation of the program, greeting, orientation, reviewing the resume, interview, get to know them, conflict of interest, volunteer application. Oh my gosh. Okay. Get together with the trainee to get to know conversations, take them on a ride along, conflict of interest, in-person interview. Okay, I want to thank you all for coming to today's webinar. It appears that you guys have it all under control. So have a good life, and we'll catch you on the next webinar. Ha! Okay. Thank you all for putting in there. Absolutely, there is. Seems like a lot of paperwork, but it really isn't that much, right? Because one of the first things that we need to do is we need to make sure we know who people are, what their motivation is for wanting to visit with residents, and we're putting them into a situation where there's a lot of trust that we are putting into these people to make sure that they are that they have the right motivation, that they understand why they're there. So I'm just gonna say that the explanation of the program, the volunteer responsibilities, the conflict of interest form, a background check, a volunteer application, the all-important interview, and then the confidentiality form. These are all part of risk management that that really kind of helps us know that this might be a good person to do this. Now, this is all from our point of view. It's not necessarily, I mean, we people are coming in with maybe a lot of information about the program. Maybe they have a friend who's already a volunteer, and so they kind of know what's going on. Others are going to come in, just a little bit weary about what is this role? Am I out there on my own? So the all of these things are all of these tasks that get done are just another opportunity for the volunteer themselves to say, is this a role that I want to take on? Um, so one of the things that is on the National Ombudsman Resource Center website is the Volunteer Ombudsman Representative Intake Toolkit. And you will see that there's a letter to a prospective volunteer. There are key points for volunteer requirements. There's an application form, an interview form. Um, it's conflict of interest form, a volunteer acknowledgement form, interview questions, just about anything that you might need. I would encourage any of you, excuse me, any of you that are using something um, different, we would love to see what you are using. We can add those potentially to an update that might be done on the toolkit in the future. So if you have a form or a letter or whatever it is that you give out during your onboarding experience, if you'd want to share those with the resource center, you can send that um, to any of us at the resource center or to our main email, which is ombudcenter at theconsumervoice.org. So these are just a few of the three of the things, because on that last slide, to be real honest, unless you had super duper eyesight, you couldn't see a thing. So these are a more visual representation of the top part of each of these resources. In the chat, you should be seeing a link to all of the PowerPoints, so you can download that. You can click on the toolkit, uh, the HTTPS, and it will take you to the page that has the entire toolkit and each of these sections separately. So hopefully this is nothing new. Hopefully when you look at it, you're not going to go, oh my gosh, we don't do that. Or so hopefully you're going to look and go, yep, 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 and then say, oh, we have something that looks a little bit different. Let me share that with the resource center. So thank you for that. So our speakers today, we have Stephen. The speakers are gonna introduce themselves. But Stephen Maxwell is with the Illinois Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program at the state level. Lynn Chow is with the Georgia Ombudsman Program at the state level. And Kalina Morgan is with the southern part of Georgia local ombudsman program in Georgia, which I already said. So, duh. Um, okay, Stephen, I'm going to turn it over to you. And if the rest of you want to stop sharing your video, that's fine. I should have had you guys wave, but I guess people will figure out who you are. Stephen, you're a little bit obvious. So, yeah, there you go.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Maxwell. I'm the Ombudsman Training Coordinator for the state of Illinois. Outside of scheduling and facilitating trainings, I'm often working on ensuring that our material is up to date and working on brochures and occasionally crunching numbers, which you'll see here in a moment. I started with the program as a regional ombudsman in West Central Illinois back in 2016, and I joined the state office last year. Next slide, please. A little bit about the Illinois program. We have a decentralized program with 17 provider agencies in 13 PSAs. We primarily have paid ombudsmen. Our benchmark for paid staff is 88 FTE. In contrast, we only have 25 volunteers with a goal of having 49 volunteers statewide. We're working on increasing those numbers. We have hybrid trainings. So half of our modules are online, and we're able to see who's viewed them and get an engagement score. The other half are in person. And then, of course, we have the online NORS modules now, which are fantastic. Um, the state office oversees most of the classroom trainings. We do have a couple regions that will do their own one-on-one trainings because they have staff who are approved to train. And finally, while the state does the classroom training, the local region is responsible for the shadowing and the paperwork and things like that. Next slide, please. So as I led trainings, I began to realize that roughly half of our volunteers just seemed to disappear after training. Um, when you put that in the context of having to bring all of the supplies to the training site wherever it is, um, it there it's you know it's very difficult to see people just disappear on us. And it kind of makes you wonder, are we getting a good return on investment? Um, so I wanted to make sure that I wasn't crazy and that we were actually losing half of our people. And so I started my investigation by looking at our certification training registrations from 2021 to present, comparing that to the certification requests, and then later I looked at decertification requests. Next slide, please. So our certification rates from 2021 to present, remember, this is the uh, number of people who were certified versus the number of people who started training. For paid staff, 93.3% of our trainees became certified. Um, I also looked at how long people stayed. So our first year turnover rate, and that's between 20 and 30%, depending on which data sets I looked at. The 20% is the one I'm more confident in because it's looking at that 2021 to present. 30% is looking from 1987 to present, and that spreadsheet has a lot of errors, a lot of bad data in it. So I don't trust it as much. For our volunteers, only 60% of our volunteer trainees have been certified, which means 40% are just disappearing or aren't certified yet. Um, of those people who were trained, 15% would need to retake their initial certification training because it's been too long since they took the training. Um, so they can't be certified based off of that training. Uh, Now, in contrast with our paid staff, our turnover for the first year is 0%. We do, and I don't remember the percentage, but we do see a turnover between 5 and 8 years where volunteers are leaving, and it peaks at around 6 years. And that may have to do with when we're doing our monitoring visits, or sorry, our quality assurance visits, trying to make them a little more friendly sounding. Um, so you know, if we're there at that first monitoring visit for that volunteer, things are going well for them, and maybe by the second one, they've dropped off. And so I think that's why we're seeing that drop off after a few years. But anyway, this information gives me the idea of a goal. We are going to see some drop off. That's going to happen. But maybe instead of 40% drop off, we should see maybe a 20 to 30% drop off. Next thing I looked at was the time to certification. That's on the next slide. Thank you. Uh, Time to certification, I measured from the start of training to the date that the certification request was made. So when did they start and when are they ready to hit the ground running? Paid staff had an average of 29 days to certification with a range of 5 to 98 days. The 98 days was during COVID, so things were a little crazy in that time period. Um, so, you know, I'm not too worried about that. For volunteers, our average was 108 days with a range of 24 to 185. It doesn't surprise me too much that the volunteer time to certification is longer because they're not being paid to go in every day. But I do want to get that number down somehow. So with this information, I took it to our regional ombudsman and I asked them for their thoughts on it. Next slide, please. And they gave me a few ideas. A couple of our agencies are union, so they pay really well, but jobs can be hard to get. So people try to improve their chances by the chances of being hired by volunteering. And if, between the start of training and their certification, they get hired, whether they get hired with the agency or somewhere else, their motivation is gone because they now have employment. Um, some of our regions have mentioned difficulty in scheduling shadowing with the volunteers. I I have a trouble with this. I have trouble with this reason. It feels like an excuse because the volunteers just carved out 2 days of their time to spend it with me. So they should be able to make the time to do what what they've signed up to do and do a little bit of shadowing every week. And then similarly, paid ombudsman should be flexible enough to work with the volunteers because now you've got an extra set of eyes in that home. Some people have speculated that the program wasn't the right fit for the volunteer, but they didn't know it until they went through training. Some volunteers have expressed confusion about the certification process. And then sometimes there's a delay between the request and the response from the state office. It's usually within a week, but sometimes it can be a little bit longer than that because if you come in on a Monday morning and you've got 1,000 emails in your inbox, it can get lost in the shuffle. So looking at this list, I decided to focus on the three areas where I felt like I could really try and improve things. Next slide, please. So the first thing I did was I added slides to the initial certification training right at the end of the day to explain the next steps towards certification. So, things like completing the online trainings, shadowing in a facility for 10 hours, and completing paperwork if it hasn't already been done. My goal with that is to ensure that they know exactly what they have to do next to be certified. The second thing that we added was an optional pre-training meeting. It's hosted online by the state office. And with this training or meeting, not a training, with this pre-training meeting, only potential volunteers and volunteer coordinators were invited. The volunteer coordinators were asked to share the invite to anyone they thought might want to volunteer. Of the people who attended our last one, only one person did not attend the training. Our goal here is to weed out the people who don't know that they don't want to be an ombudsman. So, we discuss what the program is about and what we do and how we work, how we're resident directed. Um, we want people to understand that it's not just playing bingo. Um, I've started doing a okay, I see a question. What takes place at this pre-training meeting? Can you please share the agenda? Um, I'd have to look it up, look back and find it. I can do that. But yeah, like I said, it's just mainly just talking about the program and what um what we actually do on the day to day because we get a lot of information during certification training. And while it's all needed for going in, it's it maybe doesn't prepare us for the initial shock of walking into a facility. Um, because sometimes you walk in and that laundry cart's right there, and they've been cleaning up beds, and you just don't you're not expecting that always. So we talk about that. We talk about the good. We talk about the stuff that maybe isn't so good, and we answer questions. That's the big thing. We answer questions. Um, and then finally, we've been following up with the local volunteer coordinators to check on their status. Right now, we had 4 people in our last training. About half of those people, 4 volunteers in our last training, about half of them have started shadowing. One is expected to start shadowing soon, and then one hasn't completed um, their online modules, which they can still do the shadowing even though they haven't completed them, but it doesn't give me a lot of hope. Um, it's too early to tell if these steps have worked because we're only 64 days out from the last training where all of these steps were implemented. So we'll see. Hopefully we'll be less than 108 days for this class. Next slide, please. So some of our upcoming changes, we're going to start reminding regional ombudsmen to send certification requests to the entire state office. Um, some of the people in the state office, might get 100 a day, whereas I maybe get 20 emails a day. And so it's if they send it to everyone, um, people aren't going to get lost. Emails won't get lost. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's bad, and we don't want that to happen. Um, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start encouraging pre-training shadowing. Most of our staff shadow a bit before training, and some level of shadowing is going to help our volunteers understand really what ombudsman work entails. Again, we want to show them that they're not just going to the nursing home to call bingo or to be a friendly visitor. We want them to understand that. Um, we're hoping to train more trainers so that we can reduce the amount of time it takes to get people trained. Because a person might sign up. I might get one volunteer sign up here, one volunteer there, but then it might be a month before I can get a training put together and in their area. If we can have someone locally who can train them, we can get things done quickly. Um, and then finally, we are uh, revamping, refocusing our volunteer brochure. I see a question, Stephen, how many or how often do you hold the 2-day in-person training? Um, so as far as that, how often it's based on demand. So when the regions tell me that need a training, that's when I start looking for when the training will be and where the training will be. I try to get as close to where the volunteers are going to be as possible. Um, and hopefully that helps with mileage and hotel issues. Um, and I'm not sure how many volunteer coordinators we have right off the top of my head. Um,
And
next
Stephen,
slide.
do you see the question? Will that pre-training shadowing count toward their certification?
We've always counted it for I don't know if Kelly's here to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we've always counted that for the staff, so I don't see why that would be any different for the volunteers. Um,
Okay.
we
And
just
then, sorry,
uh,
um, y-
go ahead.
um, one of your slides mentioned a delayed response from the
Hmm.
state office. What is the needed response? Is that just someone saying, "Yep, you've completed all of the requirements of hours of training, shadowing, testing, or
Yeah.
whatever?"
Yep, you've the response being yeah, you've and specifically it has to come from Kelly, our state ombudsman, who says, you've gone through everything, you're certified, and then our administrative assistant um, saying, okay, I'll get your badge out, and then our ombudsman specialist getting them into the system. So there's three things that need to happen when someone is certified, and we want to make sure that that gets done in a timely manner. Um,
Sure. Okay. And
so.
then somebody, Beverly's asked about the hours of training, and we don't really have a lot more time here, but I'm assuming you guys are following the requirement that there's 10 hours of shadowing,
Mhm.
16 hours at least of in person um, or Zoom. So, could you just say how many of it is in person, how many of it is Zoom, and how many is self-study?
So we do 2 days, so it's roughly 16 hours in person, and then the other half of that is, another, I forget how many hours it is online, and then the 10 hours on 10 hours of shadowing. But
Okay.
we do follow the standards.
Okay. Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, and so I wanted to show the last slide I have is uh, what changes we're working on towards our brochure. It's still in development, and obviously it hasn't been through the graphics team. But I wanted to show you one section. What does a volunteer ombudsman do? So the green section is the old version, and the white is the new version. New version doesn't really say anything different from the old, but it's in narrative instead of a list format. Because I wanted to really speak to the heart of why people want to volunteer, and then relate that back to the ombudsman program. So, like in the green, what does a volunteer ombudsman do? Visits residents on a regular basis, listens to concerns, reports to a supervisor. Doesn't really speak to my heart. I don't know about you. Uh, Contrast that with the block of white text. What does a volunteer ombudsman do? As a volunteer, you will work to improve the lives of long-term care residents by making unannounced visits to care communities, et cetera, et cetera. So we're starting off with that. Why do you want to volunteer? And how does the ombudsman program fit what you want to do? Then we give a quote and we give some examples of real things that our ombudsman have done. Um, so I very much recommend that you check out the book Start with Why by Simon Sinek. A lot of the book is on marketing, but really that's what we're doing when we're recruiting, is we're um, trying to get recruit volunteers, and we have to market ourselves. So that's where these changes are coming from. I see a question on if I can share our volunteer brochure. I'd have to talk with our state ombudsman about that, but I don't have a problem with that.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen. I'm going to turn it over
Thank you.
now to Lynn and Kalina.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, welcome everyone. Today we will be discussing strategy to improve the onboarding experience of potential ombudsman volunteer. So, a strong onboarding process can help volunteer feel confident, supported, and ready to advocate effectively for our long-term care resident. Next, please. So recruiting volunteer is only the first step, and how we will welcome, train, and support them determine whether they become long-term advocate. So today's presentation outline a structural onboarding model that strengthens engagement, confidence, and retention. Next, please. So this slide, we will talk about why onboarding matters. So first of all, effective ombudsman volunteer onboarding is essential because it gives a strong first impression of the program. So for example, new ombudsman volunteer meets staff who explain the program mission, read and write, and the vital role volunteer play or provide a maybe one-page PDF file or quick video explaining role expectation and the next step. And secondly, build the volunteer confidence and ensure they will feel prepared for real-world situation. So for example, our volunteer complete onboarding section that includes role-playing, resident interviewing, practicing how to report concern, and learning how to navigate facility dynamics. So when they walk into their first long-term care facility, they will feel confident because they already know what to say, how to observe, and what step to take if a resident share a concern. So thirdly, so by offering clear guidance and support early on, so our ombudsman volunteer will understand the expectation, have guidance for tough scenarios, and know how to ask for help that reduce the likelihood of volunteer dropping out. And fourthly, strengthen their long-term commitment to resident advocacy, such as we share the real-life impact story, reinforce the meaningful difference their work makes, and the continuing learning facility regulation to build confidence to advocate effectively. And finally, it also provides the foundational knowledge needed to ensure compliance, competency, and high quality services to residents from day one. So because they have been trained correctly from day one, so our volunteers know how to follow the policy, avoid the conflicts of interest, and support resident rights, ensuring the program operates ethically and effectively. Next, please. So our current onboarding challenges. So there are common issues. So our local program may face. So like ombudsman volunteer onboarding often become challenging due to the overwhelming or unclear information. So such as several policy documents at all once with no guidance on what to read first. So our long gap may be between the training step. So for example, volunteer complete an application and the background check, but hear nothing for a few weeks before the next step. And the inconsistent communication from staff. So for example, volunteer might receive messages from multiple people at a different time with overlapping or even conflicting detail. So our new volunteer may struggle to get the question answer or feel connected because opportunity for interaction are limited. So for example, they may have the orientation is pre-recorded with no question and answer section. And also training can feel intense or confusion for beginners. So for example, training includes complex regulation with little example or volunteer feel they are thrown into the facility visit without enough practice scenario, and unclear program structure or role expectation leave our volunteer unsure about the responsibility and the next step. So for example, role boundaries are unclear. So what volunteer can versus cannot do when interacting with resident or facility staff. Next, please. So what the volunteer need? So our volunteer consistently say they want clarity, communication, and connection. So they need to understand what happened next, who to contact, and how to succeed. So they also value practice opportunity and the reassurance from experienced volunteer or our staff ombudsman representative. So our ombudsman volunteers thrive when they have the clear, simple roadmap from application to certification, such as like a one-page roadmap or supported by consistent communication and personal encouragement, such as assign each new volunteer a primary staff contact who reach out within 24 and 48 hours of their application and maintain one central communication channel, for example, email, newsletter, or volunteer portal. So structural training with hands-on practice plus mentoring and shadowing opportunities help them build confidence and real-world skill. So after placement, regular check-in and feedback ensure they feel supported, valued, and connected to the mission, and leading to a stronger long-term engagement. And next, please, for our local ombudsman representative, Kalina.
Yeah, so like Lynn said, one of the primary steps that you can take when you have a potential volunteer is clear and ideally inviting onboarding process. So that's essential to the process. So you want to confirm that their information was received. Thank them for their interest and include some basics about the long-term care ombudsman program and how they as a volunteer can support the program's efforts. You want to advise the interested volunteer that you're available to answer any questions that they may have initially and be clear about the role of the long-term care ombudsman. You'll want to provide the steps involved in the onboarding process and the steps that are necessary to become certified so that they have an idea of what the way forward is going to look like for them. Let the volunteer know that although we have an ideal training timeline, we're going to be as flexible as we can for them. Next slide, please. So if there's one thing that may deter a volunteer is the lack of communication. So you want to be as fluid as possible. You don't want the volunteer to feel like they're in a silo. And even we as certified staff know that we can't do this work alone. Our volunteers need to know that we understand that and that they are supported. So provide a primary contact. I suggest maybe even a secondary contact in some instances, but provide them with the fact sheet. Our state office has one that's readily available, and it answers some of the basic questions that a volunteer may have. So the ombudsman wants to be readily available to answer questions. I'm going to say that repeatedly because that's an essential part of the process. Potential volunteers may have done some light research initially before they express interest in volunteering with your program. And not everything they may have read or heard may be accurate. So we want the opportunity to address that. You want to ask the volunteer about their interests and their preferences. Are they comfortable navigating a large facility, or might they be more comfortable in a smaller facility? Are they comfortable engaging with groups, or maybe one-on-one is more sufficient for them? what areas or regions are they interested in volunteering in? So these questions help us to engage and include the volunteer in decisions that are going to be made moving forward with their relationship with the Ombudsman program. Next slide, please. So let's dive a little deeper into the framework of the onboarding process. So we've got an 8-step process here. So step 1, recruit and awareness. So it's ideal to make the most out of every opportunity possible to promote and recruit volunteers. Since funding is limited, you may want to utilize the platforms that you already are engaged with, like social media. You can leave brochures at local libraries, senior centers, churches. Talk about volunteer opportunities when you attend community events like health and wellness fairs. And then, of course, there's the all-powerful word of mouth. So whatever your platform, the important part is to get the information about volunteer opportunities out there, so that those who are interested and are a good fit can apply for the program. So step 2, the application and screening. So once you get that interested volunteer, again, you want to extend a warm greeting to them. Let them know what the initial steps are and answer any immediate questions that they may have. Give them some oversight of the great work that the Long-Term Care Ombudsman program does and how they, as a volunteer, fit into that. You want to ask them questions about their background and their history so that both parties can make an informed decision on whether the partnership is going to be a good fit. Go ahead and lightly express the program's focus on residents' rights and the need to avoid conflicts of interest and the importance of confidentiality. Let the volunteer know that they'll be working with individuals from all walks of life and that we support all residents in the work that we do. So these upfront acknowledgments may save you and the potential volunteer a lot of time in the long run. Talk expectations with your volunteer. What expectations the program has, and then also what expectations they have of the program. For example, you want to tell them what your time commitment that you're requesting is. You also want to know from the volunteer what is their availability. Find out what communication platforms they're most comfortable with. Maybe they prefer a face-to-face, maybe virtual trainings work better for them. You want to identify that. Inform the potential volunteer of what the application process includes. So they'll ask about the history, their volunteer experience, they'll undergo a background check, and also sign a number of agreements to volunteer with the Ombudsman program. Hopefully at this point, they're still interested and you all will proceed with the application process. Let them know when they should expect to receive updates so they're informed and not left out to wonder where they are in the application process. Again, we want to encourage that they reach out if they have any questions. So we want to maintain that fluid line of communication. Step 3, so the welcome and orientation. So if all goes well with the background check, all goes well with the application, then it's time to coordinate and conduct the orientation. So again, you want to thank the volunteer for being willing to give their time to the Ombudsman program. You want to, again, be available to answer questions. Review the training that they are about to embark on with them and an ideal timeline for completion. Step 4 is the role-specific training. So this is going to involve a more in-depth discussion of the Ombudsman program, its role, and its history. You want to introduce the volunteer to the required forms and documents they'll need to complete related to the work that they'll do. Inform them that the trainings will be a combination of self-guided study, it'll be joint study with the assigned ombudsman, and will likely include some scenario-based training, role plays, and quizzes. Again, we want to be available for questions. Emphasize facts like supporting residents' rights is at the core of our work. That there is a clear requirement for resident consent before action and the need, again, for confidentiality in the work that we do. Step 5, shadowing and field support. So once the assigned ombudsman is comfortable that the volunteer has grasped the basis of the long-term care ombudsman program and feels they're ready for facility visits, the volunteer will begin joint visits where they will observe the work of the ombudsman and see how the ombudsman interacts with residents and staff. The volunteer will also be introduced to the key staff in the facilities that they may be assigned to. They'll begin initial interactions with residents under the supervision of the ombudsman, who will provide feedback and coaching. The ombudsman will also be available once again to answer questions. That's a huge part of it. We want to be available to answer those questions as they arise. Step 6, the competency assessment. So this is really an ongoing process, and it could be in the form of written tests, field observations, scenario discussions, and response. The goal here is to ensure that the work is being carried out in a manner that meets the standards and requirements of the program. We want to identify where better practices can be implemented and provide support and continued growth for our volunteers. Again, we want to be available for questions in step 6. Then we move into step 7, the certification and placement. So once all requirements are met and the state ombudsman has certified the volunteer, they can begin carrying out their duties independently and making the necessary reports that reflect the work that they're doing. The volunteers will have an assigned ombudsman, as well as the contact information for the entire ombudsman team if there's a concern or a question that comes up and maybe that assigned ombudsman is not available. Their assigned facilities are likely set by this time, and they should be familiar with those assigned facilities because they are involved in the process of the assignment of those facilities. And then we get to our final step, which is ongoing engagement and retention. So we want to provide the volunteer with opportunities to expand their knowledge and to keep learning and growing. This can be done via webinars, conferences. They can also attend community events where they learn about resources that are available to the residents that we serve. We want to invite the volunteer to attend staff meetings to build rapport and a sense of community. We want to send out newsletters or maybe host lunch and learns for the volunteers to attend. We can host appreciation events, which for us, we do at the state level and at the regional level. We send tokens of appreciation. We recognize volunteers on days like their birthdays and on holidays. The idea here is to ensure that the volunteer feels like they are part of a team and that we recognize the importance of the work that they do. Next slide, please. So how does the onboarding process work? Well, the first day is a familiarization day. So you don't want to overwhelm your volunteer, but you want to provide them with enough information to keep them interested and engaged. In the coming weeks, they'll dive into the training material. You'll get to see what pace that they're most comfortable going at and try to meet them at that place. You want to be there to make sure that they clearly grasp the information. So if you need to slow down or speed up, you have the flexibility to do that. Hopefully at this point, you've identified what platform they're most comfortable working on. Maybe they're not an online person and they prefer to have paper items, or maybe they prefer in-person versus virtual training. We want to be able to accommodate that. As the months move on, they'll begin conducting shadow visits with the assigned ombudsman, where the volunteer is going to observe the work of the ombudsman. They'll begin to engage more and more with the residents during those visits and more independently, putting what they have learned into practice. The volunteer is also submitting necessary documentation and asking questions so that they can gain more insight and more familiarization with their role as a volunteer. When it comes to assimilating the volunteers, again, we want them to feel a part of the ombudsman community. We want to make sure that they understand the organization's culture. So we want to make sure that they have a good understanding of the program duties and responsibilities, and they feel supported in that. So they're conducting independent visits, they're communicating openly, and they're assigned with their assigned ombudsman and other ombudsman staff as needed. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide, please. Yeah, okay. So now we have the sample onboarding timeline. So again, just a sample, but on days 0 through 3, at this point, all eligibility requirements have been met, and we're ready to begin training. Again, we want to make sure the volunteer feels welcome, and if they have any questions, that we're addressing those. Going into week 1, we're orienting the volunteer to the purpose of the long-term care ombudsman program, and we're providing them with those study materials. The goal is to try to make sure that the volunteer doesn't feel overwhelmed by all the materials they may receive initially. You want to jointly discuss the timeline that works for both you and the volunteer in the process of reviewing those materials and studying those materials. You want to let the volunteer know that they can work through the materials independently. And if they get ahead of the schedule or they fall a little behind, then the ombudsman, the assigned ombudsman, is going to be there to review those items with them to make sure they have a clear understanding and grasp. During weeks 2 through 3, that's when we get into the core training, and we'll review again the basis of the ombudsman program and our core focus of residents' rights. Week 4 through 6, the volunteer will begin putting that theory into practice, shadowing and on-site visits with the assigned ombudsman, where the ombudsman will highlight areas like safety during facility visits, demonstrate what an ombudsman can and cannot do in facilities. And then moving into week 6 and on, the volunteer completes the certification requirements, which could include on-site reviews and or written exams. Once the certification is achieved, then the volunteer can begin working in their assigned facilities independently. The volunteer is also provided with ombudsman brochures and posters that they can pass out while they're visiting in the facility. So during this time and moving forward, the assigned ombudsman and the ombudsman team are continuing to support the volunteer. We're accessible, we're offering opportunities for the volunteer to expand their knowledge, and we're ensuring that they know how essential they are to the work of the long-term care ombudsman program. Next slide. All right.
So for us, how to measure the success? So assessing the onboarding program is important. So in our ombudsman program can measure the volunteer success through the several key indicators. So for example, we use the experience survey, so that assess volunteer confidence, support, and overall experience. So training completion, rate that track readiness and ongoing development, or maybe retention rate at 6 and 12 months to understand long-term engagement and effective volunteer to staff feedback loops such as frequency of communication, response time from staff to volunteer inquiry that ensure the communication and the continued improvement, and the resident advocacy outcome that reflects the impact volunteer have on resolving the concern and improving the quality of life. So for example, number and the type of cases volunteer help resolve and the resolution rate of complaint handled by volunteer. So conclusion, so measuring volunteer success is not just about the number, it's about experience, the growth, and the impact. So by tracking these 5 areas, so we empower our volunteers, strengthen our program, and maximize the difference we make in the community. So next slide, please. So our final takeaway is it's important to prepare volunteers before they start by offering structural training and the mentorship and keeping communication clear and supportive, recognizing their contribution while providing ongoing learning and continuously improving the program through the volunteer feedback. And next slide, please. Okay, any question?
There was a question about how many volunteers you guys have in Georgia.
I would say about 20, and it is fluctuate right now. So people come and go. So right now, instead of we recruit the quantity, the volunteer, we want to do the quality of volunteer. So we just want to make sure our training, and especially after the pandemic. Before the pandemic, we had more volunteer, maybe about 30 some. But after the pandemic and the number of the volunteer dropped so tremendously. So we are right now to try to build up the quality volunteer, and we have 3 three level of volunteer opportunity, like a volunteer visit and associate certified volunteer and the senior certified volunteer. So have the different level of volunteer. I know according to the federal, we only count associate and the senior certified volunteer, but we have more on the volunteer visit.
Okay, thank you. Boy, lots of great information. There's been a little bit of mention about the kind of the different requirements for training. All of the states must follow the Administration for Community Living training standards, and we're looking right now to find that link on our website and put it here in the chat. But the while there is a little bit of variation, each state must provide X number of in-person or Zoom, classroom training. They can do X number of hours of personal, self-study. They do X number of hours of shadowing, mentoring. All of that has to add up to at least 36 hours. Many states tell us that it's well beyond the 36 hours. By the time you go through the training modules, whether you are using training that your state has put together or a combination of the resources from the Resource Center training modules with state specific information put in. And there's the new onboarding online training that can be a self-study. And those can, I don't know, Stephen, if you or Lynn or Kalina, if you guys use that, any of the online training to maybe they're assigned that while they're waiting to have their first, in-person online training. Oh, great, Bev. Thank you
Yeah, we absolutely do.
Okay, so you give people that, here's a link, you can follow through this training.
Yes.
Because states can, people take those, they sign up to take, and any of you, it doesn't have to be a new person, anyone is encouraged to take the online training. When you do, you sign up on the platform. Someone in your state office receives a report that says, here's three people that are taking it and they've taken module 2 or they've taken module 5 or whatever. And so someone not monitoring, but is someone is aware that people are taking the training. And Bev has put in the Administration for Community Living Training Standards document, and that's what all states are required to follow. I don't know that there were other. Oh, well, someone did ask how many hours you guys across the country, not just the speakers, but how many hours you are asking for a commitment from your volunteers, and only a couple people responded. So if there's several more of you want to shout out in the chat how many hours that you are requiring, that would be awesome. So we can be collecting that information. We are right at the top of the hour. So I want to thank Stephen, Lynn, Kalina. Information spot on. Thanks for helping with this conversation. Anyone that wants to be on the list serve of volunteer coordinators, it's an email listing. People can ask each other questions about anything to do with volunteer management. You can let someone at the resource center know, and we will get you to be a part of that group. It has 180 people in that group right now. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Good hunting for volunteers. For the and would love to, again, see samples of whatever it is that you guys are producing out in the field. Thank you again, Kalina, Lynn, Stephen, and happy holidays.
Thanks, you too.
Okay, we're done.